I don't know when I started noticing her. Maybe it was the second time she remembered my order, or the way she tilted her head when she laughed, like she was half surprised the sound even came out of her. It wasn't supposed to matter. She was just my friend's mom. That phrase alone should have been enough to draw a line, to keep things in the safe, ordinary place. But it didn't. Most afternoons, I'd end up in the corner booth of the coffee shop near campus. Half the time I was pretending to study, the other half I was staring at a blinking cursor on my laptop. The place smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt espresso, and the same old indie playlist shuffled in the background. Quiet, predictable, nothing dramatic. That's why I liked it. She started showing up there, not often, but enough that I couldn't ignore it. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe she lived close, maybe she just liked the coffee. But she'd glance over sometimes, like she already knew I'd be sitting there. The first time she spoke to me, it was nothing, just a polite, "Mind if I sit here?" Place is crowded. She set her bag down across from me before I answered, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "Yeah, sure," I said. My voice cracked a little, and I hated that. For the next 10 minutes, I tried to focus on my laptop screen, but the words blurred. I could feel her there, the sound of her spoon stirring, the faint tap of her thumb on her phone, the way she kept adjusting her sleeve. Not nervous, just restless. "You always get the Americano," she said finally, eyes on my cup. I looked up. "You remembered that?" She gave this small smile, almost like she was embarrassed for noticing. I have a good memory for small things. It's useless, mostly. I laughed, soft and awkward. "Guess I should switch it up, keep you guessing." Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. "Maybe don't," she said. And that was it. Just coffee. Just a line that could mean nothing or too much. After that day, I noticed myself doing things I never used to. Checking the shop window before I went in. Choosing the same booth, in case she came by again. Pretending not to look up every time the bell over the door rang. It was stupid. She was in her mid-40s, with this calm, grounded presence that made everyone else feel too loud. I was just a 20-something student who still forgot to eat dinner some nights. We weren't supposed to occupy the same space like that. But then, she'd be there, asking about my classes, smiling at something I didn't realize I'd said out loud. Her hand resting lightly on the table, close enough that I found myself staring at the small lines at her wrist, wondering about the life written in them. I never said much. My phone was full of half-typed messages to friends that I never sent. My nights were quiet, filled with long stretches of silence I didn't know how to fill. She never asked about that, but somehow, she seemed to sense it. One evening, just as I was packing up, she leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was about to confess something trivial. "This stays between us, okay?" I froze. Her eyes softened, steady but unreadable. I shouldn't even say it, but I like having someone notice me. The coffee shop noise blurred into the background. My laptop bag hung useless in my hand. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words never came. Instead, I just nodded. And that's how it started. After that night in the coffee shop, things didn't just return to normal. Not for me, at least. I kept replaying her words, the way she leaned in and lowered her voice like we were already in on a secret. "This stays between us." It echoed in my head when I tried to sleep, sitting heavy in the silence of my apartment. The next time I saw her wasn't at the cafe. It was at her house. Her son had invited a few of us over to watch a game. Nothing unusual, just pizza boxes, half-empty soda cans, the faint smell of reheated wings. I kept mostly quiet, as I usually did, scrolling absently through my phone while the others shouted at the screen. Then she walked in from the kitchen carrying a tray of glasses, hair pulled back loosely, wearing a plain sweater that somehow made her look more like herself than anything else I'd seen her in. Our eyes met for barely a second, but it was enough. I looked away too fast, back at my phone, heart thudding in a way that had nothing to do with the game. Later, when everyone else had gone outside for a smoke break, I stayed behind, pretending to tidy up the plates. She was rinsing dishes at the sink. The sound of running water filled the space between us. "You don't smoke?" she asked without looking up. No, never saw the appeal. She shut off the tap and set a glass upside down on the rack. Good. That habit ruined enough of my 20s. Her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. I glanced at her, but she didn't elaborate. Instead, she wiped her hands on a dish towel and leaned against the counter, facing me now. Do you like living alone? She asked. The question surprised me. It's quiet. I hesitated, then added, sometimes too quiet. She nodded slowly, as if that answer made sense to her in a way I couldn't quite explain. Silence can be heavier than noise, can't it? I wasn't sure what to say, so I just nodded. She gave a faint smile, almost apologetic. Sorry, I tend to say things I shouldn't when the house is too still. Something about the way she said it stayed with me, like she was offering a piece of herself, but only in fragments, as if the whole story would be too much. I wanted to ask her more, but the others shuffled back in, laughing too loud, and the moment dissolved. Still, it left a mark. A week later, she texted me. I didn't know she had my number, though I vaguely remembered giving it once. Something about helping her set up her Wi-Fi. Do you drink tea? I made too much. It was a small thing, but I felt my chest tighten when I read it. I told myself it was just neighborly, just polite. But 10 minutes later, I was standing in her kitchen, holding a steaming mug while she poured hers into a thermos. Thanks, I said, taking a sip. It was chamomile, soft, floral, the kind of tea you drink before bed. We sat at the table, steam curling upward, neither of us rushing to fill the quiet. The clock ticked faintly in the background. She finally broke it. I was married for 17 years, she said, eyes fixed on her cup. It ended quietly, if that makes sense. No screaming. Just emptiness that got bigger. I swallowed, unsure what to do with the truth she'd just set down between us. I didn't know, I said carefully. Most people don't. She gave a short, humorless laugh. It's easier that way. I wanted to reach across the table, to put my hand on hers. But I didn't. I just held the mug tighter. Her gaze flicked up, landing on me for a moment too long. Then she smiled softly, a shift so subtle it almost felt private. I told myself it was nothing. Just tea. Just conversation. But later that night, lying in bed, I realized I couldn't shake the way her eyes lingered. The silence between us had felt fuller than most of my words with anyone else. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It was raining the night I ended up back at her place. Not planned. I'd stopped by to return a book I'd borrowed from her son, something I could have just dropped in his backpack later. But for some reason, I didn't. She opened the door, hair damp like she'd just come from the shower, sweater sleeves pushed up to her elbows. You'll catch cold, she said, frowning at the wet shoulders of my jacket. I'm fine, I muttered, stepping inside before she could insist. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent and lemon soap. Familiar but not. Different without the noise of her son's friends filling the space. She poured me tea without asking, sliding the mug across the table. My fingers brushed the rim too quickly, too aware of the distance, or lack of it, between us. We sat there, the rain ticking softly against the windows. She asked about my classes, but her voice felt distracted, like she wasn't really asking. I answered in short sentences. The silence after each one seemed heavier. At one point, she leaned forward, elbows on the table, chin resting on her hand. Just looking at me. Not smiling. Just seeing. I shifted in my chair, heat creeping into my neck. What? Nothing. She shook her head, a faint curve tugging at her mouth. You remind me of someone. That's all. I wanted to ask who, but her eyes flicked away before I could. Instead, I traced a finger along the edge of the mug, round and round, like if I stopped, the silence would break apart. Then the front door rattled. Voices. Laughter. Her son's keys jangling. She straightened instantly, the air between us snapping shut like a book slammed closed. She stood, pulling her sleeve down, collecting the mugs too quickly. You should head out, she whispered, eyes not meeting mine. My chest tightened, though I nodded like it was nothing. Like I didn't care. Her son appeared in the doorway, still talking into his phone, barely noticing me. I mumbled a goodbye and slipped past him, the night air colder than it had been minutes before. I didn't see her for days. No texts. No too much tea excuse. Just absence. And then, late one evening, I found myself standing at her gate again. No book to return this time. No reason at all. She opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across her face before softening into something else. She didn't ask why I was there. Just stepped back to let me in. We sat on the couch this time. No tea, no distractions. Just the glow of a lamp and the sound of the rain still lingering outside. Her hand rested close to mine on the cushion. Too close. My breath caught. She looked at me then, eyes steady, mouth parting slightly like she might say something, anything. I leaned in without meaning to. Not much. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. And then she turned away. A small movement, but it felt like a wall. I pulled back, staring at the floor, throat dry. The silence stretched, unbearable. This isn't, she whispered, but didn't finish. Neither of us moved. And that's where it stayed. On the edge of something neither of us was ready to name. It happened on a walk. Nothing planned. I'd been heading home from the library, earbuds in, when I saw her sitting on a bench near the park, coat pulled tight against the cool evening air. A paper cup in her hand, steam curling into the fading light. I hesitated, nearly kept walking. But she looked up right then, caught me in the middle of deciding. Sit, she said, shifting slightly to make room. So I did. The bench creaked under my weight. My backpack slid to the ground. We sat in silence, watching the path where joggers passed, where a couple of kids kicked a soccer ball too close to the edge of the grass. You're out late, she said eventually, not looking at me. So are you. Her smile was faint, tired. Couldn't stand the house tonight. Too quiet. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. The pauses stretched, filled with small sounds. The sip of her coffee, the rattle of leaves overhead, my own shallow breathing. My knee bounced until I caught myself and pressed it still. She noticed. I could feel her watching me. You always do that when you're nervous, she said. I swallowed. You noticed that? Her gaze dropped to her cup. I noticed too much. Something lodged in my throat. I wanted to tell her how often I thought of her, how my days bent unconsciously around the chance of seeing her. But the words stuck, heavy and wrong in my mouth. Instead, I said, I thought you were avoiding me. Her head turned sharply. I was. The honesty startled me. Why? I asked. My voice was quieter than I meant. She set her cup down on the bench beside her, both hands now empty, folded in her lap. Because this, whatever this is, it can't, she trailed off, eyes fixed on her fingers, twisting the edge of her sleeve. You're too young. And I'm old. The word came out harsher than I wanted, almost a challenge. Her eyes flicked up, sharp, then softened. Older. And your friend's mother. Do you know how it looks? I didn't answer. Because I did know. I'd imagined it. The judgment, the whispers, the way my friend's face would change if he ever found out. And yet, you think I don't care about that? I asked, the words low, uneven. She stared at me, unreadable. The quiet between us turned heavy, like the air had thickened. I can't be the reason you lose something, she said finally. I don't have much to lose, I whispered. Her eyes softened again, almost breaking. She reached out instinctively, fingers brushing my sleeve, so light it barely registered. But the touch lingered, stayed there like she'd forgotten to pull away. My chest tightened, the world narrowing to that single point of contact. You shouldn't say things like that, she murmured. Why not? Because I'll believe you. Her hand was still there, warm through the fabric. I turned slightly, closing the distance without meaning to, until our shoulders almost touched. My breath felt too loud. She looked at me then. Really looked. No mask, no careful restraint. Just tired eyes that seemed to ask something she couldn't speak aloud. And for a moment, it felt inevitable. My hand shifted, inching closer to hers. Our fingers nearly touched. My lips parted. She inhaled sharply, the sound breaking the stillness. I froze. The question hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Was this the moment we crossed? Or the moment we stopped? Neither of us answered. And the silence felt like the most dangerous thing in the world. After that night on the bench, everything shifted. Not in a dramatic way. No slammed doors, no declarations, but in the subtler things. The kind of changes you almost miss until they've stacked up. She stopped coming to the coffee shop. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she'd found a new spot. But a week went by, then another. Each afternoon I sat in the same booth, Americano cooling in my hand, the door opening and closing without her. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself to let it go. And then I saw her son. We ran into each other on campus, and he was all easy smiles and small talk. My mom's been staying at my aunt's place for a bit, he mentioned casually, tossing it out like weather. Helping her through some family stuff. I nodded, tried to act neutral. But inside, the words cracked something open. Family stuff. It explained the absence, but not the silence. She hadn't said anything. Not a text, not a word. That night, I opened my phone and typed out a message. Hope you're okay. Haven't seen you around. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then I locked the screen. Message unsent. A few more weeks passed. I filled the time with classes, late nights at the library, half-hearted conversations with friends. But nothing stuck. The bench, the rain, the almost touch, it all replayed, sharper now in the absence of her presence. One evening, when I was walking home, I caught sight of her across the street. She was carrying groceries, head bent against the wind, a scarf wrapped tight around her. For a second, I almost called out. But something in her posture stopped me. She looked closed off, tired. So I kept walking. When she finally reached out, it wasn't the way I expected. A knock at my door late. Too late for casual visits. I opened it to find her standing there, hair unkempt, coat half-buttoned. She looked like she'd been driving around aimlessly before landing here. Can I? She stopped, swallowing hard. Can I come in? I stepped aside without answering. She sat at the edge of my couch, hands knotted in her lap. For a while, she said nothing, just stared at the floor. Finally, she whispered, I didn't tell you something. I waited. My ex, he's been around again. Not in a good way. Just circling. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, clutching the fabric of her sleeve too tightly. I didn't want you mixed up in that. It was the most she'd said about her past, but it landed like a barrier. Not intimacy, distance. I wanted to ask what circling meant. I wanted to ask if she was safe, if she needed anything. But the look on her face told me not to. This wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. I thought you were avoiding me, I said quietly. She gave a short laugh, bitter and small. Maybe I was protecting you. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they implied something I wasn't sure I wanted to face. That to her, I was still too young. Still someone who needed protection, not someone she could lean on. The silence between us stretched. I opened my mouth to say something. Anything, but nothing came out. She stood abruptly, smoothing her coat. I shouldn't have come. And just like that, she was gone. Back in the silence of my apartment, I sat with my phone in my hand. I typed again, fingers trembling. I don't care about any of that. I just want to see you. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. I didn't send it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And somehow, that was worse that IT wasn't planned. It never was with us. I'd just gotten back from campus, backpack still slung over my shoulder, when I saw her standing at the gate to my building. Hands tucked into her coat, head down, as if she wasn't sure whether to ring the bell or just walk away. When she lifted her eyes and saw me, something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or guilt. I was just walking by, she said, though her voice betrayed her. I nodded, unlocking the gate. Do you want to come up? She hesitated, then followed me in. We ended up in my kitchen. Small, cramped, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. I made us tea because it gave me something to do with my hands. She stood near the counter, staring at the magnets on my fridge like they might hold the answers to something. When I slid a mug toward her, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled back. For a long time, we just stood there, sipping, steam fogging the space between us. Then she said, quietly, "I shouldn't be here." I set my cup down, throat tightening. "Then why are you?" Her eyes met mine. "Tired. Raw. Because I don't know where else to go." The words hit harder than I expected. I leaned back against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. "You could have called." "You didn't have to." "I almost did." She cut in, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "A dozen times." But I kept deleting the message. I felt my chest clench at that. "Yeah, me too." That made her laugh. Soft, broken, but real. For a moment, the silence shifted. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile. Like if either of us spoke too loudly, it would shatter. "I don't know what you want from me," she said finally. The truth was on my tongue before I could stop it. "I don't want anything. Just you. Even if it's only like this." Her eyes softened, but I could see the battle in them. "Do you realize what you're saying? The risk?" "Yes." My voice was steady, though my heart wasn't. "But pretending I don't feel it, it's worse." She looked down, shaking her head slowly. "You're too young to be saying things like that." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe that's why I can." That made her pause. She set her mug down beside mine, fingers curling around the edge of the counter. She was close now, closer than she'd ever been, the scent of her hair mixing with the steam of the tea. "I don't know if I can," she began, but stopped, words slipping away. "Then don't decide right now," I whispered. Her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. She reached out then, tentative, almost afraid, and rested her hand on mine. Not a grab, not a clutch, just a touch. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The weight of her hand was enough. Her eyes lifted back to mine, and for once there was no mask, no hesitation, just a quiet surrender. "This isn't simple," she said. "I know, and it might not last." "I know," I repeated. She studied me for a long moment, as if searching for something. Then, finally, she gave the smallest nod. "Okay." That was it. No declarations, no kiss, no promises. Just that one word, heavy and human. We stood there in the soft hum of the kitchen, her hand still on mine, steam curling from forgotten cups. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like an answer. Life didn't change all at once. It shifted the way seasons do, quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize the air feels different. We didn't become some whirlwind couple, didn't announce ourselves to the world. Instead, our lives overlapped in quiet, steady ways. Sometimes it was mornings. I'd find her at the cafe again, back in that corner booth, her thermos of tea resting on the table while she read the paper. She never ordered the Americano, but she remembered mine. At 8:47 a.m. one Tuesday, I caught her looking up as I walked in. She didn't wave, didn't smile wide. Just a small tilt of her head, the kind of gesture that said I was waiting for you, but I'll never admit it out loud. Other times, it was the park bench. We sat there on evenings when the weather held, side by side, the conversation shorter now, but heavier in meaning. A few words, a brush of shoulders, sometimes nothing at all. But silence between us no longer felt dangerous. It felt lived in. Her son never questioned much, though I think he noticed the change. The way she lingered longer in the kitchen when I was over, the way my name came up too often. He never asked, and she never told. Some truths, we learned, could exist without being explained. The ex faded back into the distance, as people like that often do. And those shadows of him lingered in the way she checked her phone sometimes, or flinched when a knock came late. She began to breathe easier. Slowly. With me. I never asked her to define what we were. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Or maybe I already knew. The titles didn't matter. What mattered were the evenings spent in her living room. 2 mugs of tea cooling on the table, a game muted on the TV, her hand brushing mine as if by accident, and staying there. She told me once, in a half-whisper, that she hadn't expected this. Not at her age. Not with me. And I told her the truth. Neither did I. Time stretched. Weeks blurred into months. I learned the way she folded napkins absent-mindedly when deep in thought. She learned how I left books open face down, even though she hated the creases. We carried these small annoyances like proof. This wasn't fantasy. It was real. Imperfect. One night, after a long day, I found myself back at her kitchen counter. The same place where everything had almost started, the hum of the fridge steady, the air warm with steam from fresh tea. She set down my cup, then sat across from me. No words at first. Just the sound of her fingers drumming lightly against the table, the way her eyes softened as they caught mine. "This feels normal," she said quietly. "Yeah." I smiled. "That's the best part." She reached across then, like she had before, but this time with no hesitation. Her hand found mine easily. Familiar. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. Looking back, I think about all the moments that almost didn't happen. The unsent messages, the doors not knocked, the silences too long. I think about the rain on the bench, her words that first night. "This stays between us." And I realize now it did. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was ours. Private. Earned. I don't know if it's forever. I don't think either of us cares. What we have is enough. Quiet, steady, real. And when I sit across from her now, steam curling between us, I finally understand what it means to be seen. Not as someone's friend. Not as too young or too old. Just as myself. And that's enough.